I'm a huge advocate for exposing our children to alternative worldviews early and often while they're in the safety of our tutelage in our homes and in our churches. This is the difference between isolating and inoculating. Isolating and inoculating. We all, at a certain point, allow our children to suffer through shots and things like this. And we do so in the hopes of them building up a tolerance to certain diseases.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Hi, I'm Jim Mason, president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and this is another episode of Homeschool Talks, where I get to talk to interesting people about things of interest to other homeschoolers out there. And today I am excited to welcome my guest, Jonathan Noyes. John is a speaker, and he has a podcast and does a lot of stuff with an organization called Stand to Reason. He is passionate about engaging the culture with honest, well-thought-out reasons that people should trust the Christian worldview, which I know is of great interest to many of you. John has 10 years of experience in the legal field. We won't hold that against him. And in 2013, he earned his master's in Christian apologetics from Biola University, has 4 daughters, and his wife's name is Rihanna. Thanks for joining us today, John.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's really good to be here with you.
So what was the transition for you to go from a career in the legal field? What were you doing in the legal field, so we know just how much to hold against you? And then how did you make the transition?
Sure. Good question. I was a paralegal. I had majored in criminal justice in my undergrad. I went to American University in Washington, D.C. And the goal was to be a lawyer. One of the goals. And then I got my first job at a law firm and realized I don't want to be a lawyer. I was happy with my paralegaling duties and responsibilities. I had the opportunity to work at some really great law firms on some amazing cases, a bunch in front of the Supreme Court. We did some criminal law and contract law for celebrities. Like, it was a lot of fun. I had a great career. But in the middle of that career, I got saved. So Jesus introduced himself to me, and he changed me forever. And my kind of passions and affections changed. So it became kind of a goal of mine. First, I wanted to become a pastor. So, and I got saved. Kind of apologetics played a central role in my journey. And so I pretty much, as soon as I got saved, I Googled, the best apologetics program, and that's where you start, I guess. And I read that there was an apologetics program at this school, Biola University. I'd never heard of it. Looked it up, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is 30 miles from my house. So enrolled, I applied, I got in and started attending. And once I graduated 3 or 4 years later, my local church offered me a job. And I left the law firm to go to the church, which was kind of a dream of mine. I love pastoring. I still pastor a small little church that I started 6 years ago, Soli Deo Gloria Church. And that church that I got a job at was the church where Greg Kokel goes. And he's the founder and president of Stand to Reason. So Greg took me under his wing and started discipling me and walking with me. Every time I'd speak or preach, he would offer me critiques, and we just formed a great relationship. And then it just kind of evolved into when I left that church to start my own. Stand to Reason came to me and offered me a job. But it all starts with meeting Jesus. I haven't always been this way, as I'm sure you well know, Jim. Like, you've experienced that transformation as well.
Yeah, I my own journey was from atheism to belief to wandering away from the faith to, but never back to atheism, to coming back to the path later in life.
So what convinced you to go? Because I was an atheist. What convinced you to go to Christianity?
Well, now wait a second. This is my podcast. we got something backwards here. Well, so when I was a young man, when I was a kid, growing up, my family went to church, and when I was 12 or 13, so my dad was a pretty hardcore atheist and an angry atheist, but he still took us to church, which was, I think back on it, it's an interesting thing. And he died a couple of years ago, and we never really got to the bottom of that. But he was a geologist and was, talked about millions and billions of years and things. And a neighbor across the street, kid took me into his house, and the dad started, I was telling him about, millions and billions of years and everything. And he said, well, if you don't believe that, God created the world in 6 days and you believe in evolution, you're going to hell.
Whoa.
And so I went home and I said, wow, what? And it just sort of set me on a path of, well, if that's true, am I with my dad or am I with this guy? And it just soured me. And we stopped going to church, actually, when I was 13. And it wasn't until I was in college again that I could actually hear the gospel. And so since this is my podcast, I can go on a little bit longer.
Yeah. It's your world.
It's my world, and you live in it.
Yeah, that's right. I love it.
When I was in college, I was a Navy ROTC student. And after my first summer cruise, I came back and while during registration, met my new sophomore class advisor, who was a lieutenant aviator in the Navy, and he had just come and joined the ROTC unit. It was his first year. And over the space of the next year, he was, he took us in, kind of like he and his wife and their kids, had gatherings at their home and whatnot. And he and I became friends, and he shared kind of in a gentle way the gospel with me. And I was because of my respect for him, I didn't do what I did with the kids at the dorm. I didn't go off on him and yell at him. And then there's a guy who is sort of like Melchizedek in my life. I was driving. I needed a ride from Oregon to Southern California over Christmas, and this girl I sort of had a crush on, but she was older than I was, and so we were kind of like brother sister. But they were heading to Southern California, and her dad his name was Sam Teeny. He was a Lebanese immigrant, Lebanese Christian. He stood about 5'2". They started the Middle East Bakery in Portland, Oregon, and he was just like this bubbly, live wire guy who just, you couldn't help but smile when you were around him. And for like 18 hours stuck in a van where he made me sit in the front seat or drive with him in the front seat. And he just peppered me with the gospel as a prisoner of his van for 18 hours driving overnight from Oregon to Southern California. And it penetrated. It was the first time that it actually penetrated for me. And that was my first experience. I then was baptized in the Willamette River while I was in college. But what's your story? So I got to ask you a question though, John. Do you go by John or Jonathan?
John's great. Yeah, thanks.
So you went to Biola, which was 30 miles from your house. You do not have a Southern California accent. What's up with that?
Yeah, I grew up in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So I don't know, what's that? About 40 miles south of Boston on the South Shore.
Yeah, you can't get much farther away than that from Biola than that. No,
you can't actually. And the accent still sticks, but it comes and goes. You're going to see, like, sometimes I say things rightly, and then sometimes the Boston accent comes out. It's been I'll be in LA, well, in the LA area now. Now I live in Southern California. I've been here it'll be 20 years in September. And before that, I was in DC for, 6 or 7 years. So it's something that's dying hard. It's not going quickly.
So this is a podcast by a homeschooler for homeschoolers, and I'm sure folks would be interested in hearing both your story of your path from atheism to belief, as well as your connection to homeschooling.
Okay, so where I grew up in Plymouth, I just didn't know any Christians at all. I had never been to church, maybe Catholic church once or twice for Easter, like the Catholic church right down the street from us. But I really remember going once there, and then I didn't have any real experience with Sunday morning church for sure. None of my friends were Christian, or if they were, they didn't talk about it. It wasn't something that they participated in regularly. Church. I had friends who made their first communion and things like this, but like maybe they went on Christmas and Easter, but they weren't. It wasn't. They weren't Christian. They say that it was more cultural. And my parents, they weren't antagonistic. Like your dad was aggressive. Mine weren't. They were just kind of wishy-washy. You do you. Kind of relativism lived out as best as you can live relativism out, I guess. And like kind of find your own way, do what makes you happy, whatever works for you. And so Easter was a bunny and eggs and candy. Christmas was like lights, trees, Santa, presents. No more significance than that. And then when I got into high school, I remember starting to think about life's really most important questions, right? Questions of origin, meaning, purpose, morality, destiny, things like that. And it's interesting. We're on a homeschool podcast. The prevailing worldview in public school, as we probably all know, is naturalism. It's just the default. It's what you're taught. It's not explicit. Like, it's not like, I really don't think my teachers, especially my science teachers, were saying, I can't wait to make little naturalists. But it happened, and I was taught that science can give us the answers to most things, if not everything. Whatever science hasn't answered, it will eventually. And so I became a naturalist. And the naturalism, just for your listeners, if they don't know, is simply the idea that everything that exists is the product of a physical process. Right. Everything that exists is in the physical realm. There's no spiritual realm. There's no supernatural stuff. So that was my worldview when I went off to college, which is really where it bloomed and blossomed. I mean, taking pre-law classes and constitutional law classes, justice classes like corrections in America and things like this. I remember having moral conversations in class and me arguing from the naturalistic position that our morals are cultural, they're the social contract, things like this, Hegelian dialectic type stuff. And I remember actually having heated conversations for the first time, like debates with some Christians. And I remember them not really being able to answer me. And I was pretty aggressive too, just throw that out there. Like, I became a very vocal atheist. Like, I was the guy that if I found out, like, Jim, if we met each other and we were at like, say, a patty or like wherever, and we met each other, I'd be like, Jim, can I please take you out to coffee? And my goal would be to stomp Christianity out of you. And so that's how I was aggressive. And then into my early professional career at the law firms, I just bolstered myself. I was bolstered my worldview until I moved to Los Angeles. Actually, it's really interesting. Who moves from the Northeast to Southern California and becomes I move a liberal atheist and become a conservative Christian. It's like doesn't make sense, right? You're not supposed to have Christians in California. And well, my very first night in California, I met a girl. I like to say my story starts as all good stories do with I met a girl. And her name is Rihanna. I'm now married to her. And this is not a endorsement or a justification for people to go and find, a good atheist pagan to date to hope to convert them, because normally it doesn't work out. But in my story, it did. God used a girl. I met her literally my first night in California when my bags were still in the back of my sister's car. It was a work function. My sister was working with this woman, Rihanna. And for me, it was like love at first sight. She was amazing, incredible, fun, smart. just amazing, beautiful. And we got to know each other, eventually started the date. And then on Easter Sunday, it was our first Easter Sunday together. She was coming to pick me up just so we could hang out. And I remember getting an email from my older brother, who's an atheist today still. And it was an email mocking Jesus, mocking the cross. There were flames involved. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was definitely it was definitely a blasphemous email. And I remember getting it and thinking it was the funniest thing in the world because, I mean, after all, who takes Jesus seriously, right? So I printed this email out and I had in my mind, I'm going to share this with my girlfriend, Rihanna, and we're going to get this laugh. We're going to come together in this moment of bonding at the expense of Jesus on this Jesus holiday. Well, I showed it to Rihanna and she did not laugh. I didn't get the reaction that I thought. Instead, she said, John, I've been meaning to tell you something. I'm a Christian. And I remember thinking, no way, like I cannot possibly date a Christian because to me, Christians were stupid. They were weak-minded. They were intellectually irresponsible. I would have actually said that if you were raising your kids Christianly, I would have said that it's borderline child abuse. Maybe the state should step in. Maybe you believed because it brought you some type of comfort. Maybe it answered some existential questions for you, but it certainly didn't answer the way the world really is. Well, then I started leaning into Rihanna, trying to kind of beat the Christianity out of her, so to speak, intellectually. And I'd say things to her like, I thought you were an intelligent human being. Are you telling me you believe in Adam and Eve?
So just for everyone listening out there, that is not good dating advice.
No. No. If you want to win the affections of a woman, you probably should not berate her worldview and call her an idiot.
Not a good way to go. No.
If she was here with me, she would say two things. She would say that at the end of every date, she left crying. And one is because I was borderline mean. I was a jerk in the way that not all the time, but when we talked about worldview issues, I was a jerk. I was aggressive. And I wouldn't let things die. Like with I don't know wasn't good enough for me. And also she knew the relationship couldn't go anywhere. Like she knew she had no business dating me. She was at the kind of the way I say it is I was her rock bottom. That's what she would tell you. I was her rock bottom. And I mean, what guy doesn't want to be the rock bottom of some girl, right? So in her faith journey, she had always been a believer since birth. I mean, she was just, her mom was a strong Christian and she just always believed, which is beautiful. But she had kind of backslidden. She wasn't going to church. She was chasing the world's promises of money and success and things like this. But she was her journey was starting to go back up. She was starting to take church more seriously. She started attending a church. And actually, that's really the change for me, is she invited me to go to church with her. And I've done crazier things for the affections of a woman than go to church. So I was like, whatever, I'll go wherever you want. Hang out with me on Saturday. I'll go wherever you want on Sunday. I remember saying that to her. And I got saved in a charismatic church. So it was so strange. The first time going to church, guys, as an atheist, if you can imagine this, like I'm an atheist, right? A hardcore atheist. And I already have like no respect for Christians intellectually, none. And I remember going to the church and being kind of nervous about what to expect because you crazy born again people, I mean, who knows what we're going to see. And I go to the church and it was in Studio City, and the church, the music, by the time we got there, the worship was in, like the worship portion was in full swing. So the music was blaring. And I remember, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. Like, wow. And then they were talented. Like the worship band was talented. They could sing and play. It was amazing. And then I started listening to the words and I was like, you're singing about blood and some guy dying for you. This is strange. Like, this is really weird. You were weirder than I thought, you Christians. And then Rihanna, and then, oh my gosh, and then like, charismatic church. So, there's people spinning during worship, and then there's people like speaking in tongues over here. And I remember thinking, not only are you people wrong, not only are you deluded, but you're crazy, like legitimately crazy. But something kind of stuck. The people that I met there were really interesting and they were kind of cool. Like I thought Christians were lame. So they were cool. They would like hang out with me and put up with me. And not only that, but they were fun. And then not only were they fun, but some of them were actually smart. Like I met doctors and lawyers and bricklayers and trash guys and actors and actresses and athletes. And all of a sudden I realized, wait, you Christians are actually everywhere. Like, oh gosh, and I started to panic a little bit more. And eventually Rihanna wanted to go become a member of this church. And so I went with her to the membership meetings. And there were 4 on Saturdays. I think there were consecutive Saturdays where you spend all day Saturday learning about the church, doctrine, and all this. And the final part of that membership process is you have to meet with the pastor. So Rihanna set up her appointment to go meet with the pastor, and I decided I'm going to tag along and go with you. But not only am I going to tag along, I had in my mind, I'm going to debate this pastor. I'm going to debate him out of his faith. And I looked forward to it. I did a ton of research, a ton of prep. I went with a stack of documents on cabin dating and age of the universe and evolution and the non-reliability of the Gospels, all the errors in the Gospels. And I had everything, like how you couldn't trust the biblical worldview. And Rihanna shared her story and did great. And then Pastor Dave, he looked at me and he says, John, what brings you in today? And I said, oh my gosh, I am so glad you asked. And I just started peppering him with questions. And some of the questions he answered, a lot of them he didn't. He said, I don't know a lot. And at the end of the meeting, and this is key, so Pastor Dave, and I'm still in touch with Pastor Dave, just called me out of the blue the other day. He's amazing. And Pastor Dave, he stood up, he hugs Rihanna, and he said, Rihanna, we'd love to offer you membership to the church. And then Pastor Dave takes my hand in his, he's shaking my hand, and he looks at me, he says, John, you know what? We have enough members right now. Thanks for coming. Totally rejected. Like, and Jim, it was perfect. I know some of your listeners right now, you might be thinking this, like, how could this guy reject you? Like, you're a work in progress. Why not welcome you into the church and see what happens? God's obviously doing something. Well, if he did that, I would have thought it was absolute rubbish. I would have thought everything that I thought about the church, formal church, was true. And I would have thought that you don't care about truth, you don't care about what I believe, and that's it. But he didn't do that. He rejected me. But as he rejected me, behind me was a bookshelf. So he came from behind his desk and he pulled a book off of that shelf and he handed it to me. And he says to me, John, I don't think I did a great job of answering all your questions, but I think the beginnings to some of those answers you can find in the pages of this book. And he asks, would you read it? And I was like, sure, I'll read it. And it was a book on Christian apologetics. I had never heard the term apologetics. Apologetics is simply to offer a defense, right? In this case, the defense of the Christian worldview. I read that book cover to cover probably 6 or 7 times in the course of a couple weeks. And then at the same time, I was diving into more Christian apologetics books. I started reading people like Gary Habermas and Frank Turk and Norm Geisler and all of these guys, and I'm reading them. And then at the same time, my future in-laws gave me a New Believers Bible. I wish I should have it here for these interviews. I have it upstairs. It's the New Believers Bible is an NLT translation, super easy to read. It's a study Bible, so there's things like cornerstones of the faith, like who is Jesus, what is sin, and all this stuff. Where is heaven? And I read that from Genesis to Revelation over the course of 4 months, cover to cover. And during that experience, what was happening is God was using Christian apologetics to kind of soften my intellect and point out that reality is the way the world really is, right? It doesn't bend and contort according to our personal preferences, likes, dislikes. Reality is the way the world really is. And I started to realize through Christian apologetics that reality, I couldn't explain it according to my worldview, naturalism. I started bumping into reality, and some of those bumps really, really hurt. Answering questions like, where did everything come from? What about the existence of a moral depth to the world around us? What about the existence of the soul, an immaterial aspect of ourselves? My naturalism was impotent. It was a real problem for me. And then at the same time, I was having that interaction with the Word of God. And in that experience with the Word of God, I started to realize this book is not what I thought it was. I would have said that this was an ancient Bronze Age myth book, full of fables and tales, some good, some bad. No. That what I came to the conclusion is that this book was actually true. The authors, I mean, of course, according to the type of genre that they're writing, but the authors, for the most part, were writing as if this was true. So this was intended to be a true story of reality. And then I realized that actually it's the Bible that lines up with the way the world is. The world is exactly the type of world that I should expect to see if the biblical story is true. And I remember one day just looking at Rihanna. I was in my apartment, and she was over for dinner or whatever, I forget. But I looked at her, and I had just like, I gave her the Bible, and I said, hey, Rihanna, I think that this is true. Like, I think I'm a Christian. So I don't have like a birthday, but like over the course of about 3 or 4 months through Christian apologetics, through the Bible, and then through experiencing the world, I relented and was just like, this is actually the true story of reality. And I can no longer believe these things. And then almost immediately, I proposed, we got married, and then I went to grad school. So that's probably a longer answer than you're looking for, but that's what happened to me.
So many of the listeners today are in the middle of raising children in the homeschooling context, and a lot of parents are very, involved in wanting to help their children avoid kind of the missteps that you and I made over our lifetime. How can parents, sort of, homeschooling parents especially, and I think you mentioned earlier before we started that you and Rihanna homeschool some of your kids, or?
Yeah, so we have 4 daughters. One, our oldest, was homeschooled for 1 year, and then this year we're homeschooling 2 of them, a 7th grader and 8th grader.
So what can homeschooling parents do to kind of avoid the missteps that we took, the detours that we took in our worldview journey, not and then arriving into adulthood with a more firm foundation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a huge advocate for exposing our children to alternative worldviews early and often while they're in the safety of our tutelage in our homes and in our churches. I don't remember if you guys, if you remember a while back in Arizona, I think it was in Arizona, they built a biodome. And in the biodome, it was supposed to be a completely self-sufficient environment where they put people in and people live there and completely uninfluenced by the outside world. And one of the major problems that they're having in the biodome was trees. The trees were falling over. Like, they would grow tall, and then once they got to a certain height, they would just fall. And scientists could not understand what the problem was. The trees were healthy. They were growing just as they should. So they weren't understanding it. And what they found out is the reason why the trees were falling over is because there was no wind. So there was no wind in the biodome. So the trees were not building up any resistance. So when they got to a height, they just fell over. Their roots weren't allowed to grow deep because there was no resistance. You see, resistance is good. And I think that what we need to be doing is exposing our kids in appropriate ways to the concerns of the world around us. This is the difference between isolating and inoculating. Isolating and inoculating. We all, at a certain point, allow our children to suffer through shots and things like this. And we do so in the hopes of them building up a tolerance to certain diseases. We don't just keep our kids in these little bubbles and then all of a sudden when they're adults throw them out because they won't survive. So what I think that we should be doing is we should be inoculating our kids with the truth. So teaching our kids in the context of our homeschool communities, teaching them about evolution, and not just the Christian perspective of evolution, but teaching them from the naturalistic, teaching them true evolution. And then you teach them what it really means to be an evolutionist. You teach them why they're wrong. So the point is that we should be exposing our kids, I think, in appropriate ways to worldview issues at a young age, because they're going to get exposed. Once your kid gets a phone, once your kid gets access to online stuff, it's already too late. So we should be exposing our kids in order to inoculate, not isolate, in order to expose them to the wind so they don't just get pushed over. Does that make sense, Jim?
Yeah, and that's the counterpart to that, of course, is a topic you talk about a lot is, planting the seeds of the gospel and growing, helping kids grow their faith. Why don't you speak into that some?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. What I think that we should be doing is helping our kids ultimately find their true identity and who they are in Christ. As parents, it's actually like one of the biggest privileges of my life has been, and I've got, you guys can pray for me. I've got a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old. Like, somebody is always crying in my house, I feel like, and it's usually me, like in the fetal position, wondering what in the world is happening. But one of the best things about raising girls, in my opinion, I don't know what it's like to raise boys, I don't have any. But for girls, is shoring them up in their identity and who they are in Christ. Around every bend, me offering them their identity through Scripture and through Christ, instead of allowing their identity to be formed by the world around them. Because the world will seek to form their identity eventually. But if our kids from a very early age understand the gospel, understand they're forgiven, but understands that they're also children of God, understand that they're more than just children of God, they're fellow heirs with Christ. Understanding what I say to my kids every night when I tuck my kids in when I'm home, because I travel quite a bit for work, but when I'm home, I'll pray for my kids and then I bless them. And I put my hand on them and I bless them. And then I always ask them a question. I always say, hey, Joelle, who are you? And she'll say, Daddy, I'm a real life princess. And I'll say, why? And she says, because I'm the daughter of the true king. You see, I've been doing that since they can talk. And now, of course, it's with my 15-year-old, it's a little bit more difficult. She doesn't always give me the answer I want, but it's drilled into her. Because we sow these early gospel seeds, my 15-year-old, I see her now, I'm so proud of her. She lives her life in light of the fact that she's a child of God. She doesn't have to worry about that. It's just who she is. So I think that that's the importance of sowing these early gospel seeds.
Well, talk a little bit about your Stand to Reason ministry. What is it all about, and how can people find it?
Oh, great. Thanks for asking that. I do appreciate it, Jim. So Stand to Reason, you can find us at str.org. We are an organization, an apologetics organization, where our goal is to train Christians to think more deeply about their Christian convictions. And we participate in everything from writing blogs to doing podcasts like this with you, Jim. We do 6 reality conferences all over the country now. We've got Southern California, we've got Seattle, Minneapolis, Dallas, Atlanta, and Philadelphia, where it's crazy what goes on at these places. It's unbelievable, actually. In Minneapolis, it's our biggest location. We're at the biggest church in the state. We can't fit more people in it, and we get over 4,000 students who come to these apologetics conferences. Every venue sells out.
What age range are your students that you're trying to attract?
Great question. Middle school to through early college. But what we're noticing is actually the ages are getting older through registration. So a lot more parents and leaders are coming, which is great. We just what we say is we don't cat at the door. You can come no matter what age you are, but just try to bring a student with you, And then it's so much fun. And so and you can go to realityapologetics.com to find information about that. It's a really fun Friday evening, all day Saturday conference. We do those, and then we also travel all over the world and speak. I was just in Holt, Florida, at a small little Baptist church, kind of out in the country, and had an absolute ball for 2 days. Just offered training, spoke 8 times to the people of the church, and just offer training, do lots of Q&A. I love my job. I've got the best job in the world.
Do you ever speak at homeschooling events, conferences, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot for the life of me remember the last one I just spoke at, but we also speak. Coming up is the ACSI. There's an ACSI conference, which is a accrediting body, right? A Christian accrediting body. Mm-hmm. So myself and my colleague Tim Barnett will be at their they've got 2 conferences coming up, one outside Baltimore, Maryland, and I haven't looked at my calendar. I'm just happy to get my stuff done today. Tomorrow will take care of itself, But yeah, we speak at a bunch of homeschooling events and conferences, which is they're always one of my favorite events, especially when the parents are there, because these are usually parents. This is your audience, right? These are parents who are actually taking their worldview incredibly seriously and wanting to dive deep. They have a true concern for their kids and want to see them succeed, not just by the world standards, but by God's standards. So homeschooling events are always the best, some of the best ones that we do.
So you may know this already, but the Christian Home Educators Association of California, last couple of years, has hosted their state conference at Biola.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they're right there in your neighborhood.
I have to look them up.
Yeah.
Get to the conference. I mean, that's amazing. Biola's a great place to have a conference. It's beautiful.
Remind me, what does it stand for again? I was trying to think of it. I know it's something of Los Angeles, but what is it?
It's the Bible Institute of Los Angeles.
Bible Institute. Gosh.
Yeah, and they used to have a huge sign it was a neon sign on a building in downtown, their old campus, that said "Jesus saves," and it was like this famous sign. And they've since moved to La Mirada, which was a good move for them. But and now they have just a painting of that sign, so you couldn't miss it, which was great. Bible Institute of Los Angeles. Yeah.
So one of the early influences in my Christian walk was a pastor who had actually been discipled by Dawson Trotman of the Navigators right there in that same area of Southern California. So you mentioned that, how can any self-respecting Northeasterner go to California and become a Christian? It's actually a pretty vibrant and lively place for the Christian faith.
People don't, when I leave Southern California, like I was in, like I said, Florida, like the Panhandle, right? So, I mean, I actually just learned this. I didn't understand that the Panhandle of Florida is the South. And they have this perception of Los Angeles and California in general. And, but they're like, that's just, it's super secular. Like, how can you live there? The one, I love where I live because it's 85 degrees year round and it's always sunny. It's beautiful. And also this is a hotbed for especially Christian apologetics. And you have some great universities that are right here. You've got some great Christian thinkers that are right here. I love living here. I'm involved in a great church. I've always had a great church. There's tons of churches around us. So yeah, there's a misconception about LA. And also LA needs the gospel. Let's remember, we're called to go and make disciples, like not just have disciples come to us. We should be going into these places. So in Southern California, there's job security.
So let's end with this. Parents out there who are looking to strengthen their own faith and the faith of their children and want to get more involved with apologetics, what kind of resources do you offer or do you recommend?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Holy smokes. Reality Conference would definitely be one if you can get to it. And I'm not just trying to pump our conference. Like, I hope people, I actually, before I was at Stand to Reason, every year I went to the Reality Conference just by myself as an adult, just because it's the best Christian apologetics conference around. And it's also super affordable. If you do early bird, I think it's like $40, which is pretty cheap for conferences. The most expensive I think it gets is $69. And that's like at the door ticket prices. I'd say the website that at str.org, there's a young woman who runs an organization, and her name is Elizabeth Urbanowitz. And I figure it's something worldview. If you're a homeschooler and this is especially true for younger kids, Elizabeth Urbanowitz's worldview curriculum is second to none. And it's a lot of it for I'm super busy. My wife is super busy. Until this year, she worked outside the home as well. So I feel for the homeschool parents that are just busy. So sometimes you want a resource that's just easy. And Elizabeth Urbanowicz's resources are easy and they're spot on. Plug and play. They're really great stuff. Christopher Yuan, Y-U-A-N, Christopher Yuan is releasing some fantastic curriculum on human sexuality and these difficult issues. And he does a great job of communicating these things at age-appropriate levels. Christopher Yuan's great. Elizabeth Urbanowicz, Christopher Yuan, Natasha Crane. If Natasha would be a great interview for you, Jim. Natasha Crane, she's written a number of books geared towards parents raising kids, and she's second to none as well. Her books are phenomenal. So it's Natasha Crane, C-R-A-N-E. Let me think. Of course, Jim Wallace, J. Warner Wallace, Cold Case Christianity. He has a fantastic way of communicating, especially things centered around the resurrection of Jesus, evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. He does it in a way that is approachable, especially for students, and he has actually a student curriculum. Him and his son just launched a comic book, which is really cool, which I highly recommend. But you can see all that at Cold Case Christianity. Jim is a former cold case homicide detective. Yeah, and he's been featured on Dateline and like the 2020 episodes, like where he goes and solves 30-year-old murders. And he's been featured there like 4 or 5 times on that show. He's known as the evidence whisperer. Like every case that he's brought to court to trial, he's gotten a guilty verdict on. And he applied his cold case homicide detective skills to the resurrection of Jesus as an atheist. And he's just great. So those are some places to start for sure that your listeners may not be familiar with.
I'm going to put in a plug for a personal friend of mine who is the executive director of Worldview Academy. They put on camps all over the country as well. And he and I go way back. He was here. My office is on the campus of Patrick Henry College, and they were here a couple of years ago.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I love Patrick Henry.
The man or the college?
Is Jack Hay still the provost or president?
Absolutely. Yep.
Him and I have he's such a good man. Yeah. Him and I think he'd probably remember me. Him and I have done stuff together in the past. I'm a huge advocate for Patrick Henry.
He is, his office is just down the stairs and a little to the left of where I sit right now.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, great school. Curriculum. There's one that I didn't mention that's really good. And I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's Summit Ministries offers curriculum, worldview curriculum that started with David Noble, and now Dr. Jeffrey Meyer has kind of taken on that mantle.
I think did they move from Colorado Springs to Tennessee?
So their main campus is still in Manitou Springs, right outside Colorado Springs. So their main campus is in Manitou Springs, and they have a campus. They meet at Covenant College's campus. So their worldview intensives every year. They have they do 7 sessions of 2-week worldview intensives. 16 to 23-year-olds embark on this amazing journey. I was just there last week teaching, and I'll go back in like 2 weeks.
All right. Well, very good. I just want to thank you, Jonathan Noyes, who's with Stand to Reason, and you can find him at str.org, standtoreason.org, and lots of good resources. They've got a lot of talks that he's already done that you can listen to. And John, thanks so much for being with us today. And it sounds like you have a busy upcoming schedule.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you again. And thank you all for listening. And I hope you can check out some of the resources. We'll put all of these things in the show notes for you as well. And once again, I'm Jim Mason, president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And if you are homeschooling and would like to help protect and advance homeschool freedom, you can help us do that by becoming a member of HSLDA at hslda.org. And if you just want to help what we do, you can also make a donation there at the same site. We do two main things. We advocate and protect homeschool freedom. We also have a charity that helps homeschoolers who need a little extra help buying curriculum, single parents, disaster victims, and so forth. So you can go to our website and find out more about that. So thanks once again.
Every week, HSLDA hears from hundreds of homeschool families, many of whom are facing hostility from school officials or discrimination from colleges and employers. We've helped single parents facing criminal charges for homeschooling their children, families traumatized by wrongful CPS investigations, and even a grandmother harassed by the state for homeschooling her granddaughter. By donating to HSLDA, you can help make homeschooling possible for families like these and enable our work to preserve freedom for future generations. Give today at hslda.org/donate. That's hslda.org/donate. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.